In today's lecture, we are going to talk about homeostasis, and we are going to focus on homeostasis in humans. But homeostasis is also important to all living organisms, including all animals, plants, bacteria, protists. All the major kingdoms have to deal with homeostasis, even though we're primarily focusing on humans. So let's start by saying, what is homeostasis? You have heard this term in this course before, but let's break down this word again. So we have the first part of the word, homeo. This is a little bit of a derivation of the prefix homo, which means same. And then we have the ending of the word stasis, which means stationary or non-moving. So homeostasis is a two-part word that both sides of it means to stay the same. So it is maintaining internal, unchanging conditions. So keeping things the same. And to do that, to keep something in the human body the exact same, is going to require making constant micro adjustments and then occasionally large scale adjustments to keep everything right where we need it to be. So here are a few important conditions for humans. This is not an exhaustive list. There's tons more examples, but these are some of the biggest ones. So keeping our temperature consistent, keeping the pH of our blood consistent, our water level, our hydration, our oxygen versus carbon dioxide levels, and our blood sugar levels. So like I said, there's way more than this, but these are just a few we're going to focus on. Okay, so how does the body maintain these consistent sets of conditions? Well, we use what's called feedback mechanisms. And there's two different kinds of feedback mechanisms. You have negative feedback. This is the most common. Most of our homeostasis systems are based on negative feedback. And this is where the body senses a change from our normal, and then it either turns on a system or turns off a system to get everything put back right. So once it senses the change, it attempts to reverse the change. Okay, so if our temperature increases, the body works to reverse that and decrease the temperature. If our body temperature decreases, we use negative feedback to reverse that and increase temperature. Okay, so it's about reversing the change to get back to where it needs to be. The other type of mechanism is called positive feedback. This is pretty rare. There's only a few examples in humans for positive feedback. This is where the body senses a change, and then instead of reversing the change, it amplifies the change. Okay, so it causes the change to get even greater. And let's talk about some specific examples to make these definitions easier to understand. Okay, but remember, negative feedback, we reverse the change that has been sensed. Positive feedback, we amplify the change that has been sensed. Okay, so what is the step-by-step process that's going to occur in the human body? Well, first, you have to have a stimulus. You have to have a change occurring in the body. This is the change from the normal. So an increase in temperature, a decrease in temperature, a change in pH level, a change in water level, etc. You have to have that stimulus. You have to have that change occur. Once the stimulus has occurred, you then have a receptor. That's a special sensory cell whose job it is to detect these changes. So the stimulus occurs and your body detects that change. Then your control center, which is generally either the brain or some important glands that we're going to learn about soon from our body systems, but it controls the appropriate response. So once the stimulus has occurred and your body has detected it, then we're going to send out a signal that is going to control this and fix it to get it back into homeostasis. And then finally, we have the response. The body responds to the instructions from the control center and we restore balance. Okay? So you may have heard these terms stimulus and response before. You've probably learned about that before. The stimulus must always come first before there can be a response to that stimulus. Okay, so let's look at some important examples from humans. So temperature is a big one. So let's take a look at a nice diagram here. This is a great time to pause the video so that you can create your own diagram however you see fit in your notes. So here in the middle, this is homeostasis. This is when our body is at its appropriate temperature and everything is good. Then your body's just sort of doing its own thing when it comes to temperature. Now, if your temperature increases above normal, let's say it's the middle of summer in South Carolina and you go outside and you are sitting in the sun, or your air conditioner breaks, or you're sitting in a car with your grandma and she turns the heater on full blast, and your temperature rises too far above normal. Now, we normally have a range. About 36 to 38 degrees Celsius is our typical range. But if you get too far above 38 degrees Celsius, that's when your body is going to go, whoa, 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 temperature's way too high. We need to get this under control. Then your brain detects that the temperature has risen and sends out a signal. That signal goes to your sweat glands and you begin to sweat, because as you sweat, the water evaporates off your skin, cooling you down. It also sends a signal to your blood vessels, okay? And your blood vessels will dilate. That means get a little bit bigger. And what that does is it increases the surface area for heat exchange. So it releases heat from the body. Okay? So the response then is that your body cools back down to the appropriate temperature, and then you stop. You stop sweating, and your blood vessels go back to a normal size. All right, so that's when you heat up. What about if your temperature falls too low, too far below normal? You're cold. Well, your body senses that and the brain goes, whoa, we're too cold. Let's warm it back up. So then it will send a signal to your muscles to begin shivering, because as you shiver, it increases body temperature. Your blood vessels will also constrict. They'll get smaller, and that conserves heat. Once your body temperature gets back up to normal, this process will stop and you're in homeostasis again. And this can occur over and over again. Okay? How about another example? Let's look at oxygen. So, you're in homeostasis. You have normal levels of CO2 in the body. You decide to go to the gym and you are working out, you're lifting weights, you get on the treadmill, you start running, and as you are running, your body muscles need more oxygen to make more ATP to keep them moving. So you're using up the oxygen. As you use up oxygen, you're making CO2. Now you have too much CO2 in the body and your muscle cells are running out of oxygen. They need more oxygen. So your body detects this and the brain responds and sends to your respiratory system to increase your breathing rate. So you start to breathe heavier, bringing in more oxygen in the system. It's also going to increase your heart rate so that the blood is pumping faster through the system to get that oxygen through the body and the carbon dioxide out. Last super important one is blood sugar. So we need to maintain an appropriate amount of sugar in our blood. So after we eat, we have more sugar in our blood. So our body detects that And in this case, it's a gland. It's the pancreas rather than the brain that works. So here's an example of a gland. So the pancreas then releases insulin. Insulin tells the liver to suck up sugar out of the blood. And it also tells cells to suck up sugar out of the blood. So the blood sugar level goes down back into the correct range. Now, what if the blood glucose level drops? So you haven't eaten in a really long time, and so there's not a lot of sugar in your blood. Well, again, the pancreas detects this change and releases glucagon. Glucagon tells the liver to release sugar into the blood, which raises it back into homeostasis. Okay, so these are examples of negative feedback. Okay, positive feedback examples include milk production. So as babies are drinking mama's milk, it causes a release of hormones. When those hormones are released, more milk is produced. As the baby drinks the milk, it releases more chemicals to produce more milk. Also, contractions in childbirth. So once a contraction occurs, it releases hormones that cause more contractions to occur. When those contractions occur, they release more hormones, making even more contractions, so that the child can be born. And our last example is when blood is clotting. So when you get cut, the contents of cells spill out into the extracellular matrix, which releases chemicals that attract platelets to the area. As the platelets attach to that area, they release more hormones that attract more platelets and continue until you have plugged the hole of your cut. So remember that homeostasis is super important to life. If any of these processes go wrong, then it's a cascade within the body. So if your temperature gets too high and your body is not able to correct it, remember, think way back to when we learned about biomolecules and the importance of the shape of proteins. If your body temperature is too high for too long and isn't lowered, your proteins start to denature, so they stop working. If your blood sugar levels are not in the correct range, then you start to get dizzy, you could pass out, your organs start to shut down. So it is important for homeostasis to work, and without it, we have a lot of issues. If you have any questions about homeostasis or positive and negative feedback mechanisms, get into contact with me. I'll be happy to help you out further.